Tom Cruise, relentless, daring, always pushing limits, on screen and off. Russell Crowe, brilliant, intense, always walking the line between genius and chaos. But when these two teamed up, things got messy. Crowe thought he'd seen it all until he caught Cruise doing something he never expected. What he saw left him stunned and silent. Now for the first time, Russell Crowe is revealing exactly what he caught Tom Cruise doing, and why it changed everything. Two Hollywood powerhouses, one massive clash. So what really happened between them? Well, that depends on who you ask. Now, when you hear Russell Crowe, certain images probably pop into your head right away, right? You see the armor from Gladiator. You hear that famous line, "Are you not entertained?"
Are you not entertained?
Maybe you picture him on the battlefield, sword in hand, bloodied and roaring. Or maybe, just maybe, you think about that infamous phone-throwing incident in a New York hotel. We're going to get to all of that. But to really understand Russell, who he is, how he got here, and why so many people have strong opinions about him, we've got to start at the beginning. And I don't mean the Hollywood beginning, I mean the real beginning. Russell Ira Crowe was born in Wellington, New Zealand on April 7, 1964. But the story doesn't stay in New Zealand for long. When he was just 4 years old, his family packed up and moved to Sydney, Australia. It was supposed to be a temporary stay, just a brief change of scenery. But as we all know, life doesn't always go as planned. They ended up staying. And Australia, wild, hot, and unpredictable, became the place that raised him and shaped the intense man he is today. Now here's the thing most people don't realize. Russell's parents weren't actors. They weren't directors or writers, but they were still very much part of the movie business. They worked in catering for film sets. So young Russell didn't grow up dreaming about movies from afar. He lived with them. But here's what's interesting. Even with all that proximity to the entertainment world, Russell didn't immediately jump into acting. He didn't rush into auditions. Instead, he chose a different path. A louder, grittier, and more unpredictable path. He chose music, that's right, before the fame, before the films, before he ever stood in front of a camera as Maximus or John Nash. Russell was a musician. He played in pubs and bars, often with a beer in one hand and a guitar pick in the other. His band, famously or infamously named 30-Odd Foot of Grunts, wasn't just a side project. It was his passion. These weren't just novelty gigs. They wrote songs, toured, and recorded albums for real. And while music critics were never exactly kind, Russell didn't care. He wasn't in it for validation. He was in it because it fed something inside him, a creative fire, a release, maybe even a form of therapy. And honestly, that wild, unfiltered energy from those early gigs, you can still see it in his acting today, but of course the pull of the screen was strong. And eventually, acting came calling. Australia has a long history of launching great actors, and when Russell started auditioning for TV and film roles, people started noticing quickly. One of his earliest major roles came in 1992 with the Australian film Romper Stomper. Now, let me tell you, this was not a lighthearted, feel-good movie. It was raw and disturbing. And Russell, he played a violent neo-Nazi skinhead named Hando. That role was explosive, in every sense of the word. It shocked audiences, it turned stomachs, but it also earned him critical acclaim. People said, "Who is this guy?" Because you couldn't look away. Love him or hate him, he commanded the screen. And just when people thought he'd get typecast as a brute or a villain, he flipped the script. Just 2 years later, he starred in The Sum of Us, playing a kind-hearted gay plumber living with his father. It was gentle and completely different from his last major role. And that's when critics realized, oh, this guy has range. Serious range. It didn't take long for Hollywood to come knocking. So Hollywood came calling. And not just with a polite knock either. It basically kicked the door open and said, "Hey, we've been watching you." After his performances in Romper Stomper and The Sum of Us, Russell Crowe had officially earned a seat at the table. And when American producers saw what he could do, they wanted him in their movies more than anyone else did. Now, making the leap from Australian cinema to Hollywood isn't always smooth. Some actors get lost in the system, some get typecast, some actors never quite catch on. But Crowe didn't just enter Hollywood, he burst in. His first major role came in 1995 with Virtuosity, where he starred alongside Denzel Washington. That's a big deal, right? Sharing the screen with someone like Denzel? And yeah, the movie itself was kind of a weird cybercrime action flick, but even if the plot was all over the place, people couldn't stop talking about Crowe's performance. He was electric, charismatic, dangerous, and you could already see that edge, that fire, that would soon define his whole career. Then came LA Confidential in 1997. And let's just pause here for a second, because this was the turning point. This was the moment where critics, audiences, and studio execs all went, oh, this guy is serious. He played Bud White, a tough, brooding cop with a violent streak and a surprisingly tender heart. The movie itself was a hit. Critics praised it, and it earned 9 Academy Award nominations, winning 2. But more importantly, it put Russell Crowe on the map in a massive way. Now, most actors might have taken a break and chosen easier roles after that success, but not Crowe. That's just not how he operates. From 1999 to 2001, he went on one of the most insane hot streaks in Hollywood history. He starred in The Insider, Gladiator, and A Beautiful Mind, 3 powerhouse performances in 3 straight years, and each one of them earned him an Oscar nomination. Let's start with The Insider, released in 1999. Crowe played Jeffrey Wigand, a real-life whistleblower who exposed the tobacco industry's dirty secrets. Now, this wasn't a flashy role. No swords, no action scenes, no big monologues. This was quiet, restrained, internal. He gained weight, wore glasses, mumbled, and yet it was his eyes and silences that held the entire movie together, moment by moment. Critics lost their minds. He was up against Denzel, Sean Penn, and Kevin Spacey at the Oscars. He didn't win that year, but it didn't matter, because everyone knew that this guy was the real deal. Then came Gladiator, which was released in 2000. And look, you already know what happened here. This wasn't just a performance, it was a phenomenon. Crowe played Maximus, Roman general, loyal servant to the true emperor, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife. You remember that speech, the one that starts with, "My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius." He did not just act the role, he lived it. Every scar, every stare, every swing of the sword felt real. He trained for months, gained muscle, fought through injuries, and even lost feeling in parts of his hand from the stunts. But he did not care, because for Crowe, it has always been about the work. The movie made over $450 million worldwide. It won Best Picture. And this time, Crowe did win the Oscar for Best Actor. But he didn't stop there. In 2001, he came back with A Beautiful Mind, playing John Nash, the brilliant but troubled mathematician who struggled with schizophrenia. Again, completely different from Maximus. This role was delicate and vulnerable. Crowe had to show us a man unraveling, yet still holding on to his genius. And he nailed it. Another Oscar nomination. Another critical darling. Another chapter in one of the greatest acting runs in history. At this point, Russell Crowe was everywhere. Magazine covers, late-night interviews, award shows. Directors wanted to work with him. Studios wanted to sign him. Fans couldn't get enough. But fame is a tricky beast, because with that level of attention comes pressure, scrutiny, expectations. And for someone as intense as Crowe, all of that attention wasn't just overwhelming, it was explosive. Now look, some actors get labeled difficult because they ask for a better trailer or want extra rehearsal time. But Russell? His reputation was, well, a little more dramatic than that. Was he just hard to work with? Or was he passionate, volatile, and unpredictable? The kind of guy who could win an Oscar one night and throw a phone at a hotel concierge the next? Yes, that actually happened. In 2005, Crowe was arrested in New York City for assault after allegedly throwing a phone at a hotel employee who couldn't connect him on a call. The tabloids had a field day. Headlines like "Raging Russell" and "Gladiator Goes Berserk" were everywhere. It wasn't a good look, and that wasn't the only incident. There were bar fights, heated arguments with directors, public spats with paparazzi. It became part of the Russell Crowe mythos. Brilliant actor, terrible temper. But here's the thing, and this is important, Crowe's outbursts weren't just about ego or arrogance. A lot of the time, they came from frustration. It all came from feeling misunderstood and being obsessed with doing things right. Ask people who've worked closely with him, and they'll tell you, he's not a diva, he's not lazy, he just cares deeply, maybe too deeply. He once said in an interview, "I give everything I've got, and if someone isn't matching that energy, I lose patience." That kind of commitment can be inspiring or intimidating. And this brings us to another complicated relationship in Crowe's life, his connection with Tom Cruise. Now, at first glance, these two might seem like total opposites. Tom Cruise is all smiles, all charm, all control. He's the poster boy for big-budget blockbusters. The kind of actor who hangs off planes, runs faster than the laws of physics should allow, and never, ever breaks his image. Everything about Cruise seems perfect, almost too perfect. And then you have Russell Crowe, who is gritty, raw, emotional, and unpredictable. He's not about perfect smiles and choreographed PR. He relies on gut feelings and intensity, fully becoming the role. And if something feels off, he speaks up without holding back. So yeah, on paper, they don't seem like a natural fit. But believe it or not, they weren't always at odds. In fact, they actually had a pretty decent connection once. Let's go back to the early 90s, back before Gladiator, back before Mission Impossible was a franchise, back when both men were just rising stars in a huge industry. In 1992, Russell Crowe and Tom Cruise met at a barbecue in Sydney, Australia. The host? None other than Nicole Kidman. At the time, she was married to Cruise and she'd seen some of Russell's work. She thought the two would hit it off, maybe talk acting, maybe talk movies, and for a while it worked. The vibes were good. Cruise was curious about Crowe's passion and Crowe was intrigued by Cruise's discipline. They talked about acting philosophies, movie scripts, and interestingly enough, Scientology. Crowe actually brought it up, not because he was interested in joining, but because he was trying to understand it. He said he watched a promotional video about the Church of Scientology, just out of curiosity, one of those late-night rabbit holes maybe. And when he casually mentioned it to Cruise, he expected a deep conversation. Maybe even a passionate defense. But Cruise? He kept it cool. He simply said, "If it's important to you, you'll do something about it." Just like that. That line stuck with Crowe. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't pressure. It was just a comment. But still, it left a mark. Now, here's where things start to get messy. In 2001, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman went through a very public, very painful divorce. And this wasn't just any celebrity breakup. This was the golden couple of Hollywood splitting up, with the whole world watching. And Russell Crowe? He chose a side. He didn't make a big announcement or anything. He showed quiet, respectful support for Nicole, standing by her as a longtime friend who knew her and her family well. What about Cruise's team? Well, they noticed. They didn't like it. In fact, according to some insiders, they even reached out to Crowe and asked him, told him really, to stay away from Nicole and create some distance. But Crowe refused. He said no. He didn't like being told who he could or couldn't talk to. That rubbed him the wrong way. Always has. Then, in an interview not long after the divorce, Crowe made a joke. He said he was part of Nicole's divorce settlement package. Now, to be fair, it was clearly meant as a joke. He was trying to be funny, lighten the mood. But Tom Cruise? He didn't laugh. At all. That comment, along with the support for Nicole, seemed to turn a cool distance into real tension. From that moment on, something shifted. The easygoing connection they'd had years earlier, gone, replaced by something colder. Professional maybe, but not friendly. And for years, they stayed in separate lanes. Crowe doing his thing, Cruise doing his, no collaborations, no public meetups, just silence. Until The Mummy. Now let's talk about this movie for a second, because it was supposed to be a big deal. In 2017, Universal Pictures decided they wanted their own cinematic universe, like what Marvel had built, only instead of superheroes, they wanted monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, and of course, The Mummy. So they announced the Dark Universe, and they kicked it off with a reboot of The Mummy starring, of course, Tom Cruise. And to add some extra firepower to the cast, they brought in Russell Crowe. He was cast as Dr. Henry Jekyll. You know, the guy with the dark alter ego, Mr. Hyde. He wasn't the lead, but he was a major part of the shared universe they were building. The idea was that Crowe's Jekyll would become the thread connecting all the monster movies together. Think of him as the Nick Fury of the Dark Universe. It all sounded great on paper, but in reality, the set was uncomfortable and competitive. You had two alpha actors, two guys who are used to being the guy, trying to make this movie work. And they had very different visions of what that looked like. Let's start with the fight scene. There's a moment in The Mummy where Dr. Jekyll and Cruise's character, Nick Morton, go head-to-head. It's physical. They're smashing through walls, glass, furniture, the whole 9 yards. That scene took 4 days to film. And it wasn't just acting. Both Crowe and Cruise insisted on doing their own stunts. Neither wanted to look weak. Neither wanted to back down. So they just kept going. Take after take, hit after hit. Crew members later described the atmosphere on set during those days as icy. People picked sides. Some backed Cruise. Others backed Crowe. There were whispered arguments, creative disagreements, frustration, and the tension didn't stay in the scene. Off camera, things were just as rough. Cruise had a lot of control over this movie. Like, a lot. He had script approval. He could bring in writers. He could override directors. He could change scenes if he didn't like them. And Russell? He's not the kind of guy to just sit back and go with it. He had thoughts, ideas. He wanted more character depth, more emotional truth. But Cruise? He wanted spectacle like bigger stunts and more explosions. They constantly clashed. At one point, Crowe reportedly said that the movie felt soulless, that it was all action and no heart. That didn't go over well. Working together brought up old emotions and baggage, past tensions from the Nicole Kidman days, the divorce years, the awkward distance, and it all started to bleed into the work. Crowe later admitted that being on set with Cruise brought up a lot of unfinished feelings. He said, "Any ending to a relationship like that is heavy, man." He didn't go into detail, but the message was clear. This wasn't just about The Mummy. It was personal. And guess what? The movie flopped badly. Critics tore it apart, audiences were confused, and the Dark Universe was dead on arrival. Universal scrapped the whole plan, and just like that, the Crowe and Cruise collaboration was over. But the story doesn't end there. Because if you thought Cruise and Crowe were the only ones clashing behind the scenes, think again. The world around Tom Cruise is full of stories, whispers, rumors, allegations, and Russell isn't the only one who's raised an eyebrow or two over the years. We've been talking a lot about what happened between Russell Crowe and Tom Cruise on The Mummy. How they clashed, how the movie struggled, how the tension behind the scenes affected everything on screen. But to really understand why Crowe's story hits so hard, you have to look at the bigger picture. Because this wasn't just a one-time disagreement. And he's not the only one who found working with Crowe difficult. Not even close. The truth is, Crowe stepped into a world that many others had already struggled with. A space built around one man's image. Crowe is not just an actor. He's part of something much larger. If you've paid attention to pop culture over the last 20 years, you've probably heard about the Church of Scientology. It's always been controversial, but when it comes to Crowe, it becomes something else entirely. Something harder to explain. Many former members of the church have said that Crowe is not just a follower. He is the face of it. He gets special treatment. People are assigned to help him with everything. Cooking, cleaning, organizing his life, building his image, making sure nothing ever damages the story the world sees. And when someone new comes in with their own way of working, their own voice, that system can feel impossible to deal with. That's the world Crowe walked into. Leah Remini, a former Scientologist and now one of its biggest critics, has said that Crowe is not the kind and charming man he appears to be. She described him as someone who loses his temper, wants full control, and shows no regret. She even called him an abusive dictator, and said the church will protect him no matter what. When she tried to speak up, she says she was pushed out, shamed, and isolated. She shared one story about Crowe yelling over a batch of cookies. The recipe was off, and he exploded, screaming, furious. While Crowe never told stories quite like that, he did say the energy on set was off, that it didn't feel like a true partnership. There was one voice making all the big decisions, and it wasn't a director. It wasn't a team. It was Crowe, and that made real collaboration feel impossible. This kind of pressure isn't new. Thandaiwe Newton, who worked with Crowe on Mission Impossible 2, said she left that project feeling nervous and unsure of herself. In one scene, when Crowe thought she wasn't getting it right, he asked to switch roles and act her part to show her how it should be done. She said it shook her confidence. It didn't feel supportive, it felt humiliating. You can imagine how that kind of behavior would clash with someone like Crowe, who wants honesty, growth, and freedom in his work. It's not just actors. In 2005, Brooke Shields shared her experience with postpartum depression. She said taking medication helped her heal. But Crowe went on national television and said she was wrong. He said there was no such thing as a chemical imbalance. He told people that vitamins and exercise were better than antidepressants. His comments caused a lot of outrage. Many felt he was speaking on things he didn't understand. Crowe never spoke directly about this, but he's always been someone who defends people being open and vulnerable. That's how he works. That's how he lives. Then came the COVID-19 set rant. In 2020, during filming for Mission Impossible 7, Crowe was caught yelling at crew members who broke safety rules. He shouted about how they were the gold standard. He said if he saw it happen again, they'd be gone. Some people saw this as leadership. Others saw anger, a man trying to control everything around him. And again, it brings up the question, who is he when the cameras are off? The more stories that come out, the more clear the picture becomes. And it matches what Crowe experienced. A tight grip on every part of the process. A focus on image instead of depth. When you're an actor who wants the work to feel real and human, that kind of environment can feel suffocating. It takes away the magic of making something together. In 2022, Mickey Rourke said Crowe was not taking risks anymore, that he only does safe, big-budget movies. He called him irrelevant. It was a bold thing to say, but it echoed something many feel, that the Crowe we see today is more interested in legacy than creativity. And Crowe felt that too. He wanted The Mummy to be dark, smart, and fresh. What he got was something flat, predictable, designed more for box office than for meaning. Since then, the two actors have gone very different ways. Crowe leaned into his brand, rebooted Top Gun, focused on action films that sell tickets. Meanwhile, Crowe kept doing what he's always done. He wrote, he directed, he toured with his band. He supported small films and new talent. He didn't chase franchises or polish his image. He just kept creating. And that's what makes his experience so important. He didn't just complain. He spoke honestly about what it was like to work in a space where control mattered more than connection, where one person's power shaped everything. He saw behind the curtain, and he didn't pretend it was fine. This wasn't about personal drama. It was about the cost of building a system around one star. A system that many others had been hurt by but stayed quiet about. Crowe wasn't quiet. He told the truth, and he kept moving forward. Because when he steps on a set, he's not there to protect a brand. He's there to tell a story, and that makes all the difference. So, where is Russell Crowe now? Well, he's not chasing red carpets or blockbuster headlines the way he used to. These days, he's more focused on living life his way. A little quieter, a little simpler, but still very much himself. After years of leading roles and intense Hollywood pressure, Crowe stepped back. In 2014, he directed The Water Diviner, a personal story set after World War I. It wasn't some explosive action flick. It was heartfelt. That film marked a shift. Less Hollywood machine, more Russell telling stories that meant something to him. He's still acting, but now it's on his terms. He'll pop up in thrillers like Unhinged, or do something more laid back like The Nice Guys. He's not trying to stay on top, he's just doing what feels right. And let's not forget the music. Long before the awards and the fame, Russell was performing in pubs and clubs. That never really stopped. In 2024, he played a packed show in Leeds with his band, The Gentleman Barbers. He's not trying to be a rock star, he just loves playing music. For him, it's not about fame, it's about the joy of doing what he loves. These days, Crowe lives on a farm in Australia with no paparazzi, no studio drama. Just animals, family, and the occasional trip for a role or a concert. It's a slower pace, but it suits him. After all the noise, the fights, the headlines, maybe that's what he always needed. And when he does speak out, it's with more calm and perspective. He's still Russell, but now it comes with a bit more wisdom. He doesn't sugarcoat the past. He doesn't deny the drama, but he owns it. So what's his legacy? The Oscar? Gladiator? The tabloid moments? Maybe. But maybe it's also this. Russell Crowe never pretended to be perfect. He was raw. He gave everything. To his roles, to his music, even to the arguments. That kind of honesty, for better or worse, is rare in Hollywood. And now he's writing his own ending. No spin, no PR. Just Russell being Russell. So what do you think? Is he a misunderstood artist, a Hollywood rebel, or just a man who lived loud and learned along the way? Let us know in the comments. And hey, if you made it to the end of this story, you've definitely earned your own gladiator helmet. Smash that like button like Russell smashed through the Mummy set, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild, untold stories. While you're here, check out some of our previous videos. More behind-the-scenes drama, iconic moments, and the truth Hollywood doesn't always want you to know. Until next time, stay curious. And maybe, just maybe, keep your phones on silent when Russell's around.